Okay, so good morning, everyone, on this warm day, which will lead to a very cold night and day tomorrow. Bizarre weather that we're having. Um, our portion this week is Tissa, and let's start with the bracha. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shekidshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. What I want to focus on today, I think last year, we focused on Moses and God talking and going behind the rock. I want to focus today on the incident of the golden calf itself. So, Tissa, let's put this in context. The beginning of Tissa is the portion begins on page 523 in the Eitz Chaim, chapter 30, verse 11, whatever Chumash you're using. It's a continuation of the description of the vessels that have to be designed for the Mishkan, and also a description that every year a half shekel tax is going to be taken from the adults in the community. So it serves as kind of a census, but also it serves as a maintenance tax for the temple itself, kind of like dues for a synagogue today, but it's across the board. Everybody pays a half shekel. Aside from all the other animals and other offerings that would be brought during the year to maintain the worship, the sacrificial service itself. So we have that description, and we're told in chapter 31 on page 527 to appoint Bezalel as the chief designer, not necessarily the architect, but the chief designer of putting the details into a creative vision for how it will all look. So designating Bezalel to do that, plus a couple more things designed. And then we're also told about a commandment to observe Shabbat. So that's the context for chapter 32, which is where I want to begin today. Verse 18, right before chapter 32, verse 18 of chapter 31, which is the start of the second Aliyah, page 529. Page 529, the middle of the page in Eitz Chaim. Vayitein el Moshe kechaloto ledaber ito. God gave to Moses, when he finished speaking with him, Bahar Sinai, on Mount Sinai, Shnei luchot ha'edut, the two tablets, luchot even, tablets of stone, ketuvim be'etzba Elohim, written by the finger of God. Okay, or inscribed with the finger of God. Okay, so Moses gets the 10 Commandments right here at the end of chapter 31. Okay, so we're having a combination. So chapter 20 is Moses on Mount Sinai and the people at Mount Sinai hearing God speak the 10 Commandments. That's chapter 20 of Exodus. Chapters 21 and 22 are, and maybe 23, are the law code that kind of fills in the gaps of the 10 Commandments, right? How to build a civil society and what the laws of the civil society are. Chapter 24, until this point, is designing the Mishkan. And then the end of chapter 31 is to get us back to the law element, and that is, that's the legal. See, so somebody came to the door. Fortunately, my wagging the finger is enough to say Lenore's not here. The end of chapter 31 gets us back to Mount Sinai. Okay, so the description of how the Mishkan is built is a detour. And from the narrative, which was the the hearing of the Ten Commandments, Moses getting the rest of the Torah at Mount Sinai, and then here, verse 18 of chapter 31 gets us back to that after we had the big parentheses of how the Mishkan is supposed to be built. So we're supposed to then, by this one verse, verse 18 here, is saying to us, okay, put the Mishkan on hold as we get back to the narrative of being on Mount Sinai, and then we'll get back to the Mishkan after the rest of Ki Tissa is over, when we get to Vayakel and Pekude. Okay, so what we have before us is a messy, poorly edited text. Because if it were better edited, we'd have the chapters of Teruma and Tetzaveh describing the Mishkan, we'd have that appear after this narrative element of Ki Tissa, the golden calf. Now, so the question we need to ask is why? Why is the Torah edited this way? And I'll step even further back. How did the rabbis make sense of this poorly edited text? Okay, so there's lots of commentaries over the generations from Rashi on down, and also in the Midrash before Rashi, in the time of the rabbis of the Mishnah and the Talmud, trying to explain why this text is jumbled in this way. Okay, and the easy explanation is not only did the people hear law at Mount Sinai, they learned about how to worship God at Mount Sinai. So that the design of the Mishkan makes sense then to have, if you're talking about law and how to have a civil society, well, we can't forget also that part of the Israelite society is also how the Israelites worship. So it's not how they relate between each other. The rabbinic term would be, it's not about just bein adam le'adam, of people amongst themselves, but also bein adam lamakom, between people and God. Okay, so by having the presentation of the design of the Mishkan and designating Aaron as the high priest, and his sons as after him as the priests, as the Kohanim, that makes sense to a traditional reading of the Torah. But for reading the Torah as a better edited text, this doesn't work. And we just see that the strands of the different authorship of elements of the Torah coming together here in a mishmash way. Okay, so I wanted to have us understand how verse 18 of chapter 31 here, the first verse of the second Aliyah, kind of comes at us out of midair. Okay, so now we start with chapter 32. So we're backwards. So the text brings us back to Mount Sinai. Moses finishing 40 days, because within the portion of Yitro and Mishpatim, we're told that Moses was on the mountain for 40 days getting the Torah. God teaching the Torah to Moses, and Moses learning it. So here, chapter 32 begins this: Vayar ha'am ki voshesh Moshe laredet min hahar. The people saw that Moses was delayed in coming down from the mountain. Now, how did they see that Moses was delayed in coming down the mountain? We're told, from reading the text, the narrator told us that Moses was going to be on the mountain for 40 days and 40 nights. But is it clear from the text that the people knew that Moses was going to be on the mountain for 40 days and 40 nights? So what was the trigger for them to think that he was delayed? but maybe he was there for 2 weeks, and that made them feel that, hey, where did Moses go? He said he was going up to talk to God. Why is he there so long? So maybe 2 weeks is too long, or maybe it was 40 days and it was after the 40th day. So I'm just saying that what's the clue to the people that he's delayed? Because the clue is not clear to us. Okay. Well, um, another. So let me clarify that. It is so for us. It would mean, maybe it's the 41st day, and where we had seen before from the narrator that he's only supposed to be there for 40 days. What I'm saying is that the people at the time, what gave it away that he was delayed? So, Vayikahel ha'am al Aharon. The people gathered uh, against Aaron. So Vayikahel. So Kahal is congregation. So most names of synagogues in Hebrew would be Kehillah, uh, or Kehillah Kedosha. A way to refer to a synagogue would be the two letters Kuf with apostrophe in between, or quotation marks. So Kehillah Kedosha, holy congregation. So if we want to formally refer to our synagogue in the Hebrew, it would be Kehillah Kedosha Sha'arei Tefillah. Okay, the holy congregation, Sha'arei Tefillah. So Kehillah is congregation coming together as a group, gathering. Vayikahel, though, in this context, they're not gathering for a really positive purpose. It seems, we'll see, that they're kind of threatening Aaron. So the English here translates it gathered against. Vayikahel ha'am al Aharon. The people gathered against Aaron. Vayomru elav, and they said to him, so we're on 5:30, Kum aselanu Elohim. Get up and make for us a God. Okay? Asher yelchu lefanenu. So here's the interesting thing, that Elohim technically in Hebrew is a plural word. Elohim. We translate it as God, and we assume if we're reading the English translation, we're reading God as a singular. But in Hebrew, technically, the word Elohim is plural. It's like the word for life, l'chaim. Chaim technically is a plural word. Or mayim, water, is a plural word. Or shamayim, sky or heaven, a plural word. So technically speaking, then the way Hebrew works is if the noun is in the plural, all the other words in the sentence have to be in the plural to accommodate the noun for it to be grammatically correct. Okay, we don't see that in the English translation because English is structured grammatically differently. Okay, so get up and make for us gods, technically, but the word is Elohim, which is the word for our God with a capital G. Make for us a God, or make for us God who will go before us. But the will go, or shall go here, is plural to accommodate the word Elohim. Okay, so make for us a God that will go before us. Kizeh Moshe Haish Asher Elanu Meheretz Mitzrayim Lo Yadanu Mehayalo. Because this man, Moses, who brought us up out of Egypt, we don't know what happened to him. Now, the interesting question would be, who's speaking to Aaron here on behalf of all the people? And how is it that all the people are saying the same thing? So we're not told in the text who's representing the people here in speaking to Aaron. Now, secondly, Aaron, why isn't Aaron saying, hey, hold on, guys. I was just up on the mountain with Moses. We offered a sacrifice there. I saw God there, right? It describes at the end of the portion Mishpatim how Aaron, his sons, some of the elders of the people of Israel were on the mountain and saw God on his heavenly throne and the sapphire pavement on which the throne is settled. That's what's described for us in the portion Mishpatim. So, how is it then that Aaron isn't responding? We'll see in a moment. He isn't responding, hey, hang on, calm down, let's just be patient. We think he should have, because he was just there with him. Okay, so that's a question we should be keeping in mind. Why isn't Aaron saying that? Why doesn't he respond by saying something about, hey, look what I saw on Mount Sinai, God's heavenly throne. It was what a spiritual experience I had. Nothing of the sort there. And who's speaking on behalf of the people against Aaron in this way? We don't know who this person is. So verse 2, Vayomer Alehem Aharon, Parku Nizmei Hazahav, Asher Bo'oznei Neshechem, Benechem, Uvenotechem, Vahaviu Elai. Okay, so the people want Aaron to make a god who's going to replace Moses. And Aaron, instead of saying, hang on, guys, says, take off the golden jewelry, or golden rings, it says, that are in your wives' ears and the ears of your sons and daughters, and bring them to me. So here's another interesting thing. Again, when we have the design of the Mishkan presented to us with all the fancy textiles and gold that have to be used for that, where did these slaves get that? And then also, here they are, still they're slaves. What are they doing with gold jewelry in their ears? We can't imagine slaves having jewelry in their gold jewelry in their ears. How could that be? So that's another question about the text. Okay, so again, the traditional readers who see the Torah as true and as the word of God would say, well, this is the jewelry that the Egyptians showered the Israelites as they left Egypt. And we're told in earlier in the book of Exodus that that's what happened. That's a polite reading of the text, if not that the people of Israel looted the Egyptians for this. So that one traditional answer would be that that's how they got the jewelry, from looting the Egyptians or from the Egyptians showering gifts upon them. Or we might say that this is written later and just whoever wrote this much after the time of the Exodus couldn't imagine people not having gold jewelry. Okay, so, but still, we're presented with this major challenge here to Aaron. Aaron was just designated back in last week's portion to be the high priest. And he's supposed to be wearing something around his head, a headband that says "Holy to God." Okay, so that's what we're told in last week's portion. And here's a man who was told that he has to wear all the time "Holy to God." He's now telling the people of Israel, take off your wives and children's gold jewelry and bring it to me. And that's not exactly a "Holy to God" kind of response. Okay, adds further weight to the idea that maybe last week's portion and the portion before hadn't chronologically happened yet. But even if it hadn't chronologically happened, we do know that Aaron was on the mountain with Moses, seeing that mystical vision of God on the heavenly throne with a sapphire pavement on which it's resting. And so how can that person who sees something like that respond to the people by saying, bring your gold jewelry to me? And verse 3. Okay, so lots and lots of questions here about Aaron, about what he saw, what he didn't see. What kind of leader is he as the high priest of the people? How is this a response that represents him Kodesh Ladonai, holy to God? Verse 3, Vayit parku kol ha'am et nizmei hazahav asher bo'oznehem. And the people took off all the gold jewelry that was in their ears, Vayaviu el Aharon, and they brought them to Aaron. So now, Aaron asks for the jewelry of the wives and the children, and the response is that it seems like everybody brought their, even the men who might have had gold jewelry on, brought that too. So they went above and beyond what Aaron said. Aaron says, give me the jewelry of your wives and children. The people responded by giving him all the jewelry. Okay. 4, Vayikach miadam, vayatzar oto bacheret, vayaasehu egel masecha, vayomru ele Elohecha Yisrael, asher he'elucha me'eretz Mitzrayim. So he took all that gold from their hand, and he vayatzar oto bacheret is translated here as cast in a mold. Okay, so he melted down the gold. How he knew how to do that, who knows, right? Because that's the other thing. They're all slaves in Egypt. Was Aaron, or it says Aaron did it, but how? Maybe those slaves who worked in Egypt for goldsmiths knew how to do this. But did they bring the high intensity furnaces with them out of Egypt? Like, how you have to have a pretty intense fire to be able to melt down metal. A fire that would reach what, 1,000 degrees, 2,000 degrees? How high does it? Pretty high, and a bonfire doesn't do it, right? It has to be some kind of furnace. So how do you have a furnace if you're marching through the desert? Okay, something else to keep in mind. It's one thing to have a bonfire to roast an animal on to offer as a sacrifice. It's another to have an actual furnace to be able to melt down gold and then have molds with it also to be able to fashion something else. Okay, so he melted down the gold, put it in a mold, and made a molten calf. Egel masechat. Egel is a calf. Masecha is translated here as molten. He made that melted gold into a molten calf, and they said, these, so because it's the plural in the Hebrew, but the English, this is your God, O Israel, who brought you up out of the land of Egypt. Okay, Ele Elohecha Yisrael. This is your God, O Israel. So as you know, we have to keep in mind, Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Right, in Deuteronomy chapter 6, that declarative statement that becomes the statement of what it means to be Jewish. Hear, O Israel, the Lord your God, the Lord is one, is in contrast to this statement when the golden calf is produced. This is your God, O Israel, who took you up out of the land of Egypt. Okay, so it's a statement that could be said about God with a capital G, but it's said instead about this golden calf. 5, Vayar Aharon, Vayiven Mizbeach lefanav. Aaron saw and built an altar before, and an altar was built, or he built an altar before him, or an altar was built before him. Vayikra Aharon, Vayomar Chag Ladonai Machar. And Aaron proclaimed and said, there will be a holiday to Adonai. So God with a capital G. There'll be a holiday to God tomorrow. Okay, so the molten calf is Elohim, but there is still Yud He Vav He according to Aaron. So, and six, Vayashkimu mimacharat, they got up early the next day. So he declared a holiday the next day, and the people, instead of sleeping in, got up early. They got up early, Vayashkimu, right? It says early next day. They got up early the next day, Vaya'alu olot, they offered up offerings, Vayagishu shlamim, and they brought peace offerings, Vayeshev ha'am le'echol v'shato vayakumu letzachek. And the people settled in to eat and to drink, and they got up to, now, letzachek, to be amused, or they got up for amusement or entertainment. So it says here they rose up to dance. It doesn't, the above the line commentary doesn't explain why letzachek would be translated here as to dance. I'm saying letzachek, Isaac, his name is that root, Yitzchak, based on Sarah saying, people will laugh if they hear that I'm pregnant in my old age, right? And so letzachek should be related to the laughing. So some kind of joyous feeling that you have. So I'm just saying the dancing, translated as dancing, not sure that that's the correct translation here. It could be an element of what letzachek means, but it's more of they got up to be exuberant. They got up to show how happy they were. Okay, now was it dancing? I don't know, but yes, they did some dancing afterwards. That's what Moses saw when he came down the mountain. So I wanted to read these first 6 verses. Now let's look below the line to see how our commentary kind of puts this in some homiletical context. So if we go below the line on page 530, we'll read this introduction here. The people who only a few weeks earlier had been slaves in Egypt, where they had witnessed Egyptian idolatry, could not comprehend the God without physical form, as the second commandment called on them to do. Maybe, maybe not. I don't know. It's not the people. The people want some kind of, who's going to lead us? Moses, this man Moses went up, has not come yet. We need an Elohim to lead us. So it's Aaron who's coming up with this golden calf. It's not the people. Aaron just asks for so the people want something. Aaron gives them something, and it seems like he has an idea in mind. Right? So this is Aaron's idea. Give me the gold. He doesn't say, hold on a second, guys. I need to think about how to respond here. I don't know. Moses didn't tell me that he was going to be late. Moses didn't tell me this is what to do if I'm not down in time. So Aaron could have said all of that and saved us all this trouble. Now, all this trouble is that this event becomes the event that is that for which we are still spiritually trying to overcome. So according to the rabbis and traditional Judaism over the centuries, the temple was destroyed in Babylonia by the Babylonians, the first temple, the second temple by the Romans. We can even argue that all the terrible things that have happened to the Jewish people over the centuries is partly as a result of this event. Okay, had there not been a golden calf, had the people been patient, the possibility from the Bible's perspective and from rabbinic perspective, had the golden calf not happened and the people had been patient, our relationship with God would have resulted in so much more blessing, and terrible things that happened to us over the centuries would not have happened. But the fact that the golden calf happened, which then, and God forgave the people for the golden calf, right? The people aren't punished by wandering for 40 years because of the golden calf. They're punished for wandering for 40 years because of not listening to the scouts' report, which we read about in the book of Numbers. So the fact that they are forgiven here perhaps allows the people to think that they can sin again, so the rest of the Bible, not just the rest of the Torah, but the rest of the Bible has stories of over and over and over again how the people neglect God's ways, and then somebody brings them back to God for a little bit, and then they neglect God's ways again. In the Bible class that we're doing on Friday mornings, we just started the book of Judges. Judges is a perfect example of this, of a judge coming along to save the people from exploitation from an outside enemy, which the outside enemy comes along because the people have neglected God's ways. So it's a cycle. People neglect God's ways, an enemy comes along, they're subjected to that enemy for 8 years, for 10 years, for 20 years. A judge comes along and saves them, and there's peace in the land for 40 years. Okay, so that's the most that in the book of Judges, 40 years. At one point it was 80 years, but usually it's 40 years of peace. And then the people say they're getting antsy, they take for granted this time for peace, and then they neglect God again. So all this cycle is all about, it stems to the golden calf. Some of the liturgy on Yom Kippur is related to some of the story here in the golden calf. The language of "I forgive you," or Moses pleading on the people's behalf enters into the Yom Kippur liturgy. So the story becomes this liturgical archetype. So it's not just a one-time event. It's as important in the spiritual history of our people as Mount Sinai and the Ten Commandments is. So it's the juxtaposition of hearing God's voice on Mount Sinai, receiving the Ten Commandments, and also creating the golden calf and dancing around it at Mount Sinai too. So that is human condition in a nutshell in this portion. And it's not the people. I'm just raising the question to what the commentary raised here. It's not the people doing this. It's Aaron doing it. Okay, so the people who only a few weeks earlier had been slaves in Egypt, where they had witnessed Egyptian idolatry, could not comprehend a God without physical form, as the second commandment called on them to do. Not sure whether the people from context here is it Aaron. Maybe Aaron, as a result of seeing God on God's heavenly throne with the sapphire pavement, maybe I don't know, he saw that physical God in a physical form, and maybe he thought that there should be some representation of that physical form on earth. Don't know. Okay, so we go on in the commentary. Moses later in verse 11 refers to your people whom you delivered from the land of Egypt, as if to remind God of the influences to which they had been subjected there. Right? It's hard for people who were slaves in Egypt for over 200 years to suddenly leave that slave mentality and become what God wants them to be. It's hard to do that, to make changes like that, let alone to do it overnight. The Midrash, the rabbinic commentary, compares the situation to that of a man who bought his son a store in a notoriously corrupt neighborhood and then blames the son for having been corrupted there. So, like the idea, what do you expect? If you want the people to be good people, then and forget about slavery, well, take them far away from any other kind of influence around them. The people needed a visible, tangible symbol of God's presence. They had just come from Egypt, where everything, even death, was rendered visible through pyramids and mummies. It was extremely hard for them to grasp the idea that the greatest reality of all is intangible. The text seems to imply that at least some of the people who saw Moses as an embodiment of God wanted the golden calf to replace the vanished Moses, without whom they felt abandoned. According to Hirsch, so Hirsch was the founder of modern Orthodoxy in Germany in the middle of the 19th century, also wrote a commentary on the Torah. According to Hirsch, the people did not understand that God had taken the initiative in reaching down to them, believing that Moses had the power to summon God. Without Moses, how could they ever be able to experience God's presence again? So perhaps, according to Samson Raphael Hirsch, what's going on here is that they needed Moses. They thought that Moses was the only way that the people would have access to God. They wanted enough. So that's giving the people the benefit of the doubt. What do they? What? They don't want an idol. According to Hirsch, they want access to God, and Moses is the only one who can give them access. And now Moses isn't here, so we want access to God. Okay, maybe that's what's going on. It's unclear, actually. A whole variety of explanations could help us understand what's going on here in this story. Aaron is consistently portrayed in Jewish lore as a peacemaker and conciliator. All right, so that's the other question. Aaron doesn't come across very well in the story, and yet he is allowed to be the high priest. He is allowed to be the one who's going to be in charge of the worship service, despite the fact that he's the one who sinned gravely by making the golden calf. So he's consistently portrayed in Jewish lore as a peacemaker and conciliator. Moses was the lawgiver, proclaiming standards and prohibitions, the prophet who denounced those who fell short of those standards. Aaron, in his priestly aspect, met and accepted people where they were. Moses proclaimed, "You shall not." Aaron welcomed people who brought their purification offerings to atone for their violations. Legends tell of Aaron's efforts to reconcile feuding individuals. In this instance, however, Aaron's inclination to accept rather than to challenge popular will led to misfortune. Okay, so this is an oversimplification. This below the line commentary, it's an oversimplification of the how nuanced this story is, and how spiritually challenging the story is too. Is Aaron the bad guy in this story? Unclear. If from a straight reading of the text, Aaron should be seen as the bad guy, and Aaron should be punished for not standing up to the people and encouraging the people to wait. At least saying to wait, if not saying to the people, "You're wrong, that we can't do this. I cannot do anything for you. God is our leader. There is no substitute for God. Moses is our leader. There is no substitute for Moses. Let's have faith." The fact that Aaron didn't say any of that should be a major problem. And the fact that the rabbis allow nice things to be said about him. In fact, the tradition is that we should be like Aaron, to love peace and to pursue peace, and to bring people close to Torah. How do the rabbis come up with that idea that that's what Aaron is doing? Well, they base it on the fact that Aaron still was the high priest and served for the rest of his life as the high priest of the people, and they create midrash to flesh those details out. So there's how the story is presented here, and then how the rabbis understand it, and then which lens are we supposed to be reading the Torah through? Are we supposed to be reading the Torah through the lens of the words themselves, or do we read it through the lens of the rabbis reading the text? Right. So I always understand through my approach to Torah and the way I was taught through the conservative movement is that the rabbinic lens is one lens. It's not the only lens through which to read the Torah. Okay? Whereas in the Orthodox world, the rabbinic lens is the only lens through which we read the Torah. Okay? So it's understanding this in a non-Orthodox way gives us options. But the options then, if we want other people to be writing in this way, it's only in modern times that we see other explanations, other readings of the text that are non-traditional. And so so that's what I wanted to bring up from studying the Torah. To any questions or comments that people? Yes, Bob, and then Barbara. Bob first.
Well, first, until I sat here and read this,
Yeah.
I never realized Aaron was complicit.
Uh-huh.
I thought he was off to the side. So
Right.
thank you for enlightening me.
Yes.
But the Hebrews came to Egypt. Weren't they already believing in one God and not a physical?
So it's an interesting question, Bob. If we read the Torah, seeing that this is the actual history of the people, then the people in Egypt descended from Abraham and Sarah should have learned about a covenant that we have with God. How they learned it, how that idea was handed down from one generation to the next, we don't know. We don't know. But so in the Midrash, people were naming their children Hebrew names. There was some kind of education going. I like the idea that Judah set up schools in the land of Goshen. So yes, according to the rabbis, they learned Jewish things and the covenant. But for biblical scholars, there's a question. Even some scholars suggest that not all of Jacob's children went down to Egypt. Some of them stayed behind in the land of Israel. So this part that to actually come up with the actual history, like what happened here, we don't know. We don't have any evidence of this. The first evidence that we have of a people called Israel is from around the time of King David or a little bit before, where the people are already a people, a society living in the land of Israel. Historical evidence from before, we don't have. So all of this then is supposition. All we have is the Torah, but the Torah is not meant to be actual history. It's a perspective on history with giving us it's a spiritual perspective on history. So it's not accurate in any way. So we don't know what they learned.
Not to pick on Aaron and Barbara, I don't mean to take up
No, it's
the
all right.
time,
We have
but
time for Barbara too. Yep.
he was in Egypt with Moses.
Yeah.
He saw the miracles
Right.
that Moses did.
Right.
He was up there, and all I can think of is, oh ye of little faith, being the high priest.
Right. Right. I don't. So this is what we're left with. How to figure out Aaron's response, and there is no good way to explain it. There is no way to explain it. I just don't know. Just don't know.
Okay. Well, thank you for this
new
insight.
Yeah, Barbara.
The number 40 appears a lot in the Torah.
Right.
And at times, if the definition, rather than the number 40, it just means a long time.
Right.
Now, Moses went up for 40 days, which is just a long time.
Right.
Is there enough unrest going on that the only way that Aaron sees to keep things from going from total chaos,
right,
is to
Yeah, maybe. That's it. Yeah, so that's giving the Aaron the benefit of the doubt here by saying, I need to keep the people in line. We're going to have an unruly mob. Things are going to get out of control. I need to keep them in control. And he didn't necessarily think anything bad of it. And the fact that he's still believing in Adonai, right? He still refers to Adonai in verse 5, says he doesn't think he's doing anything wrong. This is just a way, the golden calf would just be a means for the people to have access to Adonai. It's possible that we could see it that way. And we don't know, like I said at the beginning, we don't know how long a long time was. What was he, how long, how did the people know that he was delayed? Nobody from the text we have before us, the people don't know how long Moses is supposed to be on the mountain. So yeah, so there are a lot more questions than answers. Yes, Barbara?
And the other thing I found interesting is that it says the gold from the ear,
Yeah.
and later it's mentioned that the indentured slaves would put.
Oh, yes. So
and
if a
was that
slave wants to
taught?
keep, if a slave wants to stay a slave, he's supposed to have his earlobe pierced. Yes.
And if that was something that was happening even earlier, then
Yeah, but in Deuteronomy, when we're told they're supposed to do that, well, it doesn't say that something has to go in the ear. It just says you're supposed to pierce the ear. So it's so in our mind, maybe we understand the pierced ear means that you have to have some kind of jewelry there or something in the ear to keep the hole there. So I don't know. The text itself doesn't say that in Deuteronomy, but there could be a relationship between the pierced ear and Deuteronomy to remember that we're supposed to be to God and not, and we're supposed to be servants of God, not servants of a human being, could be in opposition to what happened here, where the people clearly were worshiping an idol and not God. So yes, there could be a connection with that. Yes. So yeah, that's a good homiletical way to make a connection between the gold earrings here and the slave in Deuteronomy. Yeah. Okay. So good. Lots of questions about this. Food for thought. And I wish everybody a good rest of the day. And we pray for peace in Israel. Take care, everybody.
thank you.
Bye. Thank you.